Hey, what's up guys? Mike Locke here. Thanks for checking out this video. So a couple of days ago I posted a video on keeping your website simple for starters. Now this was a quick video, kind of spare of the moment video that I threw together like within minutes. Just a quick screencast. I didn't really think about what I wanted to say and what I wanted to talk about in that video, and but I just touched on the fact that if you're starting out in web design, you should keep your website simple. Now I was thinking about it because there's more to say about that. There's more to say about in keeping your website simple in terms of your logo design, in terms of your website designs. And what are some practical things that you can do to actually achieve simplicity in your websites and in your logo design? And that's kind of like what I want to talk about in this video. So but before I give you some pointers on these on some of the things that you can do and execute on to keep your logos and your website simple, first off, the term simplicity, or the notion of simplicity, is sort of a subjective term because there's really no right and wrong in doing so, because what's simple to you might not be so simple to me, and what's simple for me might not be so simple for you. But there are some, I think, some concrete things that you can do to actually achieve what I think we can all agree on, that would conclude that the logo or the website has an appearance of simplicity. And let's start off with the logo design. Okay, logo design is one of those things where I always say keep your logo design simple, and everyone knows that your logo should be simple and clean. Now let's look at some of these logos here. Okay, these are some logos that I picked out. These are some simple, clean, nice designed logos. Now there's thousands of other examples that looks like these, and what the things that make these designs simple is a few things. One, they're designed where they all work with one color. Okay, so that's important. If you can design a logo that works well with one solid color, you're on the path of simplicity. The other thing is, if you notice on these logos, there are pretty much no intersecting lines on the logo. So what I mean by that is when you have objects that are crossing, basically they sort of intersect and they become one. So if you have two lines like this, you don't really notice that they're intersecting, but in fact that they actually merge as one logo. So if you look at the Nike swoosh, as it connects with the E, it doesn't actually cross the E, but it actually connects and it forms into the E, so it forms one object. Same with the Dell. The E on the Dell connects with the letters. Okay. Same with the Microsoft. Some of the letters actually connect, and also with the Apple logo. If you look at the Apple logo, you have the apple. Obviously, you have the leaf on the apple, and it doesn't really connect, right? It's separated, and you'll notice there's several logos that are like this out on the web, and a lot of the things that you see. You go to an airport and you look at some of the signs in the airport. You notice that some of the objects and some of the clean design on some of the signs out there are solid objects. They don't really conform, or they don't really have conflicting, intersecting lines throughout their logos and their icons and things like that. Okay, so that's important. And in terms of intersecting lines, look at these three lines here. Okay, you have three lines like this, and you have these three lines in three different colors. Okay, and then there's a couple ways you can do this to achieve simplicity. One, you can actually just make them all merge into one, which will conform to a solid color, or you can also have them intersect in a different way where the lines are intersecting, they don't actually cross paths. Okay, like this here. So there are a couple ways you can achieve the simplicity rather than showing the three solid lines that are actually crossing. So you want to merge them into one solid color, but don't have the paths cross. And this sort of principle, this simple principle, can be used throughout your logo design process. So if you have some typography going on, make sure when your typography, when they're touching and things like that, make sure they go well together. If they touch, make them merge into one. don't make them cross paths and have a few different colors, and it looks sort of not so clean and simple. Okay, so also another important thing is you want to focus on spacing. Spacing within your logo design is really simple. Look at the logos again. Look at Nike. All the letters are spaced equally apart. Microsoft, they're spaced equally apart. Veer, the logo Veer there is, the letters are kind of spaced evenly apart. Puma, they're spaced evenly apart. Okay, so if you have spacing between different letters that are inconsistent, that will throw off the subconscious thinking that this particular logo is simple. It'll actually won't come off as effective as it would if it was a solid, consistent spacing throughout the logo, in addition to the solid color, limiting different colors, and also non-intersecting lines, okay, throughout your logo design. So keep that into play. Also limit, if you're going to do gradients, limit your gradients to very subtle gradients, not harsh gradients. A harsh gradient being that you might see a black up top and a gray at the bottom, and it fades really hard, and you see that little line in between. Make sure the gradients are really subtle, so you don't really see any lines in between on when the colors change. Okay, and then also limit to no drop shadows in your logo design. Okay, so if you limit those things, you should be straight forward and moving on the path to simplicity in your logo design. All right, so on to websites. Websites are websites. You can also carry over these same principles that I just talked about in logo design and carry them over to web design. Now, web design is a little different too, because one of the easiest things that you can think about when trying to achieve simplicity in websites is saying, you know what, hey, maybe if I just remove a lot of the content, remove a lot of the features, I will achieve simplicity. Yes, that's true, but that's not always the case, because you can have, so let's say, a couple things, but those two things on the website could be not designed well. You can have a chaotic logo or some, a large paragraph of text that doesn't really fit well. Okay, so some things that you want to think about when you're designing your logo or your websites is a few things. First off, starting with the logo, make sure you keep your logo simple, like I just talked about. Secondly, you want to work on spacing. Your spacing needs to be accurate or consistent throughout your site. So if you're consistent at the top of your site with let's say 10 pixels or let's say 20 pixel spacing, make sure there's 20 pixel spacing throughout your site, and not things aren't really tight in certain areas and spaced out in other areas. So make sure your spacing is equally spaced out apart. Make sure keep your text short and your paragraph short, and not so much copy. Maybe keep a couple of sentences and then link to a learn more or read more sort of link to read more on that. Okay, so keep your paragraphs short and tight, and keep the length of the actual text short. Not so you don't want to have a long text where I'm reading across like that. Okay, so you want it to be like I'm reading like this. So also the other thing is maybe you want to conform to a grid system. I don't necessarily use an actual grid system. I use a fake grid system where I do keep things within columns, and I try to conform to equal spacing. But make sure you have things in columns, and you have certain groups of content that are within that conform to a grid system. Okay. The other thing is, make sure you also want to think of things in terms of containers. So I like to say, you know what, you have your logo and your navigation up top. You have your billboard section, which is your main selling points, and you have that's what I would use for my billboard. And then I have my 3 boxes. Okay, you can go to my website and look at my website. That's sort of that's what I would call containers. You have these different sections, and what happens is you have content within these containers, and that also, what that does is it makes it, you can have a lot of content, but it makes it look simple, because what happens is the user can subconsciously focus in on these different separate containers individually without being overwhelmed with sort of like a free-floating tons of content on your site. Okay, so make sure maybe you have things in containers. Look at Yahoo. And this is a good point because simplicity doesn't mean that you have to have nothing on your site. I consider Yahoo a simple design. There's a lot of science behind this site because this site's one of the top sites in the world, and it has tons of content. It's a portal, okay, and it has tons of content. But I still look at the site and say, you know what, this is the simplest that you can make it, because what it has is it has tons of content. But if you notice, if you go to the site, look at the containers. It's very subtle containers around each section, or around each of the content sections. And what happened is, as users browse this site, what makes this site looks visually appealing is that users can easily focus in on certain areas because it is contained within different areas, within different sections and boxes. Okay, so look at that site and kind of take note of that, and then focus on the spacing. The spacing is right. And then also the other thing in web design is the other thing that makes your site look simple is obviously go easy on the gradients. If you're going to use gradients, do subtle gradients. Also go easy on the drop shadows. The other thing is you want to make sure that you're consistent with the typography. Okay, consistent typography, consistent spacing, and things like that will also conform and make your site appear simple rather than chaotic. Okay, so these are just a few things I wanted to point out, because in my last video I didn't really point these things out. So if you focus on these things, maybe I went over them fast, replay the video, check these out, and just there's not just one site that I can point you to and say this is the site that you want to stick with, because that's not the case, because there are many different designs that can appear simple, but they kind of adhere to some of these principles that I just went over. All right, so focus on these things. Replay this video if I went over these pretty fast, but think about these things and apply these things to what you do in web design, and you'll start to achieve simplicity. The last thing I forgot, I was going to mention this: white space. And your website doesn't really need to have white space, but it could be, white space is a term where there's just empty space. Okay, so you can have a green or a black background, but if you have lots of space, that also gives you the appearance of simplicity. So make sure you throw white space in there. All right, so that's all I got for this video. Hopefully these tips were helpful and you can add these to your process. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk soon. Talk to you later. Bye.